Shalom Aleichem. We will say a few words having to do with the parasha that's coming up, this coming Shabbat, Parashat Noach. With your permission, I would like to dedicate this lecture to the memory of Rabbeinu Ovadia Yosef, whose yahrzeit is today, the 3rd of Cheshvan. May the merit of his good deeds and his greatness in Torah serve to be for the good of the Jewish people wherever they are, and may his memory remain in our hearts forever. He is the Maran of today. Of course, the Maran, as we know, is the Shulchan Aruch, Rabbi Yosef Karo. But Rabbi Ovadia Yosef has the privilege to have acquired this title for this generation. Like the Torah says about Noach, Tamim haya bedorotav. Noach ish tzaddik. Noach was a righteous man. Tamim haya bedorotav. Perfect. He was perfect, but in his generations. Today we call Maran Rabbi Ovadia Yosef, we call him by the title Maran, our master. There's no question about it, at least among the Sephardim, he was a tremendous Talmid Chacham, a giant of Torah. He did not stop learning for a minute. Wherever he was, day and night, he learned Torah non-stop. So he is Maran in our time, no question about it. The Torah says, Ele toledot Noach. These are the generations of Noach. And then the Torah starts telling me, instead of telling me what are the generations of Noach, meaning the children of Noach, the Torah tells me about his great character, his great deeds. Tzaddik. Noach ish tzaddik. I mean, pay attention that even the name itself of Noach means patience, nice, kind with the people. Our sages said, Shma Garim, the name of a person could be the reason for his destiny. It is possible that the name that is given to a person, to a baby when he is born, we give him on the 8th day of the day of his Brit Milah, we give him a name. One has to be careful what name to choose, because the name is going to be very much instrumental to his upbringing. I have in my mind many kinds of examples for good and for bad, and I prefer not to go into this, but I believe very much in that the name has to do a lot. Once you choose a good name, such, let's say for example, you call the baby Avraham, don't you dare change it. Like the Torah says, V'haya shimcha Avraham, because Avraham is a great name. It's a name of great merits. If one will cut it to become Avi, like many people in this generation, that's what they do. His name is Avraham, that's old. So it becomes modern. It becomes Avi. Very great mistake. I believe very much in that. It's possible for a person whose name Avraham was changed to Avi. Maybe he will not be a Talmid Chacham. Maybe he will not be as great as he was supposed to be. Anyway, this is just passing by. So Noach, the Torah says, these are the generations of Noach. Stop 1 second. Noach, that's a good name. It means good. It means nice. Very positive. And that's why the Torah is telling me the good character of Noach. Why? Because it has to do with his name. The name Noach suggests that he was this kind of character. He was Noach labiriot. He was good towards people. That's why the Torah comes up and gives a formidable testimony on this man. Ish tzaddik. He was a very righteous man. Imagine, if the Torah itself comes and gives such a testimony, there would be no doubt about his great righteousness. There are many people whom we think they are tzaddikim, but who knows what goes on in their heart? Who knows what they are really? But when the Torah says that Noach ish tzaddik, number one, he was ish. Not everyone was given this word ish, except Moshe or Hashem himself. He was known as Ish Milchama. Moshe Rabbeinu, the Torah calls him the Ish Moshe Anav Meod. So we understand that to be called Ish, you have to be a great person, a great personality. And here the Torah testifies to the fact that Noach, he has a good name, Noach. He was Ish, which means a man of great character, a man who had potential, a personality, a leader. But at the same time, he was tzaddik, righteous. Tzaddik brings the word tzedek, justice. It means he was just. And not only that the Torah adds more into this, as though it's not enough to say tzaddik, but tamim haya bedorotav. Tamim means perfect. Perfect means no one can be better than him. Is that so? How do we know? The continuation, the words, haya bedorotav. In his generation, Noach was the most perfect man that you could ever find. What happened in his generation? In his generation, it was a very evil generation. Remember, this was the generation of the flood. In this parasha, we are going to read the destruction of the world. In that flood that God brought upon the world, because it says, "Vatishachet haaretz ifnei ha'elokim." Even the earth became ruined, completely ruined, because of the deeds of its inhabitants. So before God, this is when it says hashchata. Hashchit, it means total ruination. Therefore God says, that's enough. And yet he was patient until it says, "Vatimmaleh haaretz chamas." Chamas has to do only what's between people. Among people, there was no justice. Among people, there was no honesty, there was no integrity. Hamas means they robbed each other. They stole from each other. They didn't have any consideration towards their fellow men. There was only one exception, one man, Noach. You see, our sages said that when one person is good, he's enough to save the whole generation. In the case of Noach, unfortunately, there was a respite of 120 years until the Ark of Noach was completed, after the building of the Ark of Noach. And now that's it. The fate of the earth was sealed and the destruction followed. Our sages said that maybe Noach did not do enough to convert his people, the people of his world, to change them. Many of our sages explain, maybe many of the commentators, that he tried, but he was not decisive very much, probably because he saw that the evil is so prevailing that he said, no use, there is no hope. Such a feeling sometimes comes upon us. It's not the right feeling, because people have to believe, no matter what, we have to believe in our fellow man. You see, a Jew, he forgot completely his Judaism. I know many of my friends. I mean, they were in a country in which they could not be religious. They could not do anything. And yet they came to a country in which they were able to become religious. They became religious. I'm not saying that all of them, but those who did it, they are proving that it's very possible. So it's always possible to change people. Noach did not try enough, according to the understanding of the commentators. But nevertheless, the Torah gives its testimony on Noach, that he was a beautiful man. Tamim haya bedorotav. It means he was perfect, but only in his generations. Our sages in Masechet Sanhedrin, in the Talmud, it's brought in Rashi, you could see it in Rashi, in his commentary, that there was speculation as to what's exactly the level of righteousness of Noach? The words that appear in the Torah, Bedorotav, in his generations, have caused a commotion among the sages. One group of sages said that if in his evil generation he was still capable of retaining merits of righteousness and perfection, it means that in a better generation he would be capable of becoming even better. Very possible. We know that. It's very known that many times Jews who live in a society which is extremely secular, they are secular also. When we come and tell them, no, they cannot, they have no power, because they are surrounded with Jews who are not Shomrei Torah and Mitzvot. So, if some of them would decide to go and live in a neighborhood that is religious, there is a great chance that they will change also. Which means changing one's convictions or religion to changes has many times it has to do with the society with whom you live. You cannot compare a guy who lives in Haifa or Tel Aviv to somebody who lives in Yerushalayim. I'm not saying that everybody is religious in Yerushalayim and everybody is non-religious in Tel Aviv or Haifa. No. But we understand that in Jerusalem there is much more possibility to be more religious. Why? Because the religious population is more vigorous. You see it all the time. But in Tel Aviv it's very hard to see very religious people. That by itself could change, could cause people all kinds of things. So now in the generation of Noach, there was so much evil that it was very difficult to be a good man. It has to do with society. But the Torah says that in his generation, Noach was capable of remaining a saint, a righteous man. So those sages who judge him positively, they say how much more of a righteous man he would be if he were to live in the time that is better generation than his own generation. But there is always the other class. Another group of rabbis judged him to be not so great. Why? Because in his generation he was the best. But take him to the generation of Avraham, our father Avraham, he would be considered nothing. Nothing? When a person has been given such a testimony by the Torah itself of being righteous and everything, that's a very big question. Nevertheless, our sages, they know what they say. They also agree that Noach was a very righteous man because of the evil that there was in his generation. But at the same time, the generation of Avraham was more righteous. Avraham himself was in such a society. Even though they worshipped idols in the time of Avraham, but the integrity of the people was much better, unlike the time of Noach. And it is the integrity of people that causes people to think. When people start thinking, then there is hope they would find out the best solution in their life. As far as I am concerned, I understand the best solution for the Jew is to become a Jew who is an observant Jew, who keeps the Torah and the mitzvot. You have to understand that without the Torah and the mitzvot, there will be no Jewish people. And according to our belief, if there is no Jewish people, the rest of the world will be extinct also. That's what our sages said. And there are proofs to that, and there are many sources that testify to that. So people who do not practice our religion, what do? They don't think, that's all. They don't sit down and think. That's because there is a lack of integrity. But if there is honesty in the air and integrity in the air, people will start thinking. They will start thinking, there is a good chance they will find the proper solution to their life. So, that's what we can say about Noach. So first, his name. Noach, good. and then Ish Tzaddik, righteous man, and then Tamim, perfect, but Bedorotav, in his generations. Et ha-Elohim hitalech Noach. Our sages said, and according to the Torah, here the Torah that it says that Et ha-Elohim, which means Noach walked together with God. That's a statement that means to say that he did all the required observance of those days. Everything as he understood, as God wants. But our sages added also that he walked with God, which means he needed the help of God. Without the help of God, he would not be able to do much. But when it comes to Avraham Avinu, our father Abraham, it says there in Parashat Lech Lecha, the next parasha after the next week, it would say, Hitalech lefanai vehiye tamim. God said to Abraham, you walk ahead of me. What does it mean? I mean, all this is only a parable. It means that Abraham knew what is right, and even without the intervention of God, God was watching him. But Abraham was by himself. He kept looking for God, and he kept trying every kind of cult and religion at that time. But he was a thinker. Because he was a thinker, he understood that those idols and those false gods were just plain falsity. It cannot be the God. Until he exploded and he bursted saying, where are you, God? And that's when God appeared to him, when he was already 75 years old. But what am I saying? This is already the lecture regarding next week. In the meantime, Noach, Et ha-Elohim italech Noach. He goes together with God. Listen, I wish in our generation there would be people to think enough to go together with God. I mean, without too much understanding, but at least to know that this is an obligation for the Jew. It's terrible, terrible, such a terrible destruction when a Jew does not inculcate what he received from his parents, as far as Judaism is concerned, to his own children. Deliberately, he is destroying the future life of his children. But he thinks otherwise. Why? Because he doesn't bring himself to think. And why? It's mostly because of society, the neighbors, the friends with whom he is. Otherwise, if a person can bring himself to just think a little, perhaps he would change. Perhaps he would think about the profundity of our religion, the profundity of Judaism and its beauty, and the fact that we have received 613 commandments, plus so many other commandments by the sages. All this came to us as a gift to preserve us and to protect us. As it says in the Talmud, there is a certain, the Talmud says in Masechet Yevamot on page 20, where it says that why is it that the sages added all kinds of mitzvot, of commandments. So number one, it's because they wanted to protect the mitzvot, the commandments of the Torah itself. Ushmartem et mishmarti. So our sages explain in that page of Gemara, it says that they wanted very much to build a fence around the Torah so that the Torah will be preserved. So why? Why so much? Very simple. Because they understood that this is the future of the Jewish nation. Imagine that in every generation, in the time of the Talmud, a whole generation of the Jewish people rested on one person. Like, for example, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, who asked for Yavne after he saw the destruction of the second temple. He asked the general, the Roman general, give me just Yavne and its sages. What was he thinking about? He was a thinker. Because he was a thinker, he understood that either he does something about it or there is a total extinction of the Jewish people, of Judaism per se, coming up. So immediately he said, let me start all over again. We have examples here and there. Rabbi Akiva, for example, there was a great calamity that happened in his generation. All his students, thousands of students, great Torah scholars, all of them perished, except 5 more rabbis in the south of Israel. Any old man, I mean, with the age of Rabbi Akiva at that time, he would have given up. But he started all over again. בבוקר זרע זרעך ובערב אל תנח ידך. In the morning you plow, you sow. But that does not mean that in the evening you will stop. בערב אל תנח ידך. Do not rest in the evening. That's what Rabbi Akiva did. That's what all the sages have done. That's what Rabban Gamliel did. They were fighting for the future of the Jewish people. They knew that the future of the Jewish people is in danger in every generation. I don't have to tell you the history of the Jewish people, it's known. But today, when we have the state of Israel, you think there is no danger? There is a great danger to Judaism. If God forbid, God does not help us, who knows what's going to be especially after this terrible plague of the corona. It's causing terrible things to the life of Torah. We all know that. And people are quick to judge the ultra-Orthodox who defy the decision of the government. Of course, the law of the government is very important to follow because it saves life. But those people, they think that the real life of the Jewish people is based on the Torah. If you stop learning the Torah, what's going to be with Judaism? So we cannot judge them. But in order not to judge them, you have to sit down and think. You start thinking. That's very good. That's already the beginning of the redemption, when we start thinking. The Talmud says in Masechet Berachot, on the 9th chapter, if you see a donkey in your dream, expect the redemption to come, to follow. What does it mean? That's a mysterious statement. What's a chamor? What's a donkey? Usually a person who thinks he is the wisest and he is the most, the person who has the biggest knowledge, and that nobody is smarter than him. In fact, he is a donkey. Because the donkey also thinks that he is smarter than any other animal or any other creature. I think in this generation, people who do not think, that's because they think they are smarter and no one is smarter than them. They look upon the religious people as inferior in thinking. So what happens? That's terrible, right? But it's possible that there is hope, maybe because of that. We expect the redemption to follow. So maybe the redemption is coming. Maybe Mashiach is coming. So let's hope to see a better time. Let's hope to see the redemption of the Jewish people in this world, which is so confused today. And we hope and pray that healing shall come upon the earth, including, of course, the land of Israel. Amen. Shabbat Shalom.